we just had to redo our AI policy as we've already updated our generative AI policy to just be an AI policy. And there are 200 external AI tools that we've seen people internally use. That's not a bad thing per se.
That doesn't scare you?
Well, we didn't block those. We're monitoring them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to click through and basically making sure you understand the policy. Go use those tools, everybody. But don't use data types that we've set in our policy not to use.
Yeah.
Heck, go out there and have fun and figure this stuff out. And if you need data, we'll synthesize some data for you to use.
If you're making technology decisions that impact people, budgets, and outcomes, you're in the right place. Welcome to Insight On, the podcast for leaders who need technology to deliver real results. No fluff, no filler, just the insight you need before your next big decision. Hi, I'm Jillian Viner, and today we're going trick-or-treating with Insight's global CISO, Jason Rader. We're going to dive into the tricks and treats that security teams and line of business leaders need to be aware of today. All right, well, October is Cybersecurity Month, and in the spirit of things, we're going to go trick-or-treating with you. You are our Global Chief Information Security Officer, so I'm sure you have no problem sleeping at night, no concerns with all the things going on with AI and all the new regulations that are happening. There's like a punch list, I imagine, that is on your brain. Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, you talked about sleepless nights. Even in October, it's scarier. So it's scary anyway, but it's scarier in October.
Yeah. We're going to try to maybe prevent some security nightmares from happening.
Yeah. I guess the treat is I'm going to let other people maybe sleep a little more soundly after we talk.
That is a wonderful gift. Yeah. So we got a bunch of different things to talk through because we're going to basically hit on the things that maybe teams aren't paying enough attention to, or there's maybe some misconceptions or just some things that have changed a lot.
There's a lot of change.
Yeah.
And ingesting all of that change is hard. We've been moving so fast that I feel like everybody's in the same place that we are. But there's a lot of people who haven't really started the journey yet. And the mad hookup of waiting is you get the knowledge of the folks that went before you. So hopefully this will help those guys.
Yeah. That kind of leads me to one of my first questions for you, because the speed of technology is changing fast, means the speed of security is changing fast. Yeah. Does it feel like you're in a more reactive state than you've ever been? Has it changed how you approach meeting with your team and going through the latest security threats and what patches and changes you need to make in your security strategies?
It kind of feels like that every time I watch or read or do the, my daily kind of intel briefing of what's going on in the world. And I'm like, oh, did we prepare for that kind of thing? But comfortably, when we look back at the framework that we put in place and the program that we have in place, we're feeling pretty good about the governance and the controls and those kinds of things that we have in place. But it is, every day there's some kind of, hey, are we okay with that? Oh, that's a thing. Have we thought about that? And luckily, when you've got like a multi-layered program, instead of relying on just this lock on your front door kind of thing, it's helpful. But it's still, we've got to continually check and monitor. It's really all the aspects of security. Sometimes there were some things that you put up there and you're like, we're cool. Now you've got to make sure that you're checking all of those things, even policy and governance and things that you never really have to say, hey, does our policy cover this? Those are the kinds of things that you really want to make sure are sorted out so that you can feel comfortable. And again, nobody's in the business of having a security program. People go to market and do business kinds of things. So security enables that business. And we want to make sure that the compliance requirements we have to do business and those kinds of things are in place. So sometimes the new stuff that's coming up, especially AI, is requiring us to do that. Yeah,
you told me earlier that people are actually coming to you with compliance questions, which blows my mind, because who gets excited about compliance or actually cares about it? It's like, ooh, another compliance training, said no one ever.
Sorry about that.
But why? But that's changed now, and that's fascinating. So people seem to like they're taking a little bit more ownership and accountability over security. Like this is a group effort.
Well, totally. And I think that's a great thing. The awareness that we're working on internally is important for us as well. Every day, people are making ethical decisions for the company. And with the ability of the tech to go way beyond where they've gone before, they can really potentially do some damage if they're not doing that. So I think that it's awesome when people kind of reach out and ask those questions. But I also think people protecting kind of their line of business based on, hey, we're in this, we develop code for clients, and their requirements are we have to tell them whether we're using AI to develop. And those are the kinds of things, making sure that we're compliant there, making sure that the procedures are in place to do that, making sure that we can audit those controls, because sometimes just saying you do it isn't okay. You have to prove that you do it. those are all the aspects. So I think it's great. And I think, security as an enabler for business is my dream come true. That's the treat.
That is a treat. Yeah, you're kind of famous for saying, like, put an end to the security office being the office of no. Yes. It's the office of know-how. Where in your career, or maybe where in like the technology change trajectory, did you come to that conclusion?
I think, so I was a consultant for 25 years before I became like the stay in one place CISO person.
And we're so glad that you did.
And I'm thrilled. It's awesome. But I never thought about it from that perspective before. So it wasn't something that the Department of No was something I kind of worked through with a client and very many times I had to be the mediator between IT and InfoSec or other parts of the business where those guys just weren't working together. And I didn't want that to be my legacy, and the whole aspect of the way that the CISO works now is a business enabler. If you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong, honestly.
Do you think a lot of companies are still stuck in that mode, or are they starting to make that transition because AI is forcing them to do that?
They're realizing it for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's just as they look around and figure out, everybody kind of window shops when they're looking at the way other companies do things. Nobody says, no, we don't want security to be a partner in the business. Whether or not they can make that manifest is another thing. But I think for all you CISOs out there, you want to be on the side of the business, not on the side of stopping the business.
Yeah. The trick definitely is, I'm an employee. I've got this cool new ChatGPT or whatever interesting new tool comes up, and I want to just go play with it because it's going to make my day easier. And my biggest fear is that if I let IT or the security team know that I'm using it, they're going to tell me, sorry, put the kibosh on that. It's now blocked. I can't access it.
So I want to address that because, we just had to redo our AI policy as we've already updated our generative AI policy to just be an AI policy. And in it, I was just talking yesterday, there are 200 external AI tools that we've seen people internally use. That's not a bad thing per se.
That doesn't scare you?
Well, we didn't block those. We're monitoring them. Mm-hmm. You have to click through, basically making sure you understand the policy. Go use those tools, everybody. But don't use data types that we've said in our policy not to use.
Yeah.
Heck, go out there and have fun and figure this stuff out. And if you need data, we'll synthesize some data for you to use. That's the way that I think you partner with the org. We don't want to say no. But there are obviously some sites that we've deemed, or some tools that we've deemed are not acceptable for contractual reasons with our clients and those kinds of things that we block all out. But no, use it and then come to us. So I think the thing is any tools game on with the basically public data. But then when you want to use the confidential data, we have a process where we can vet that. And I think that's the way you've got to work with your organization.
Yeah. I will give kudos to your team, too. You've done a really remarkable job of making a lot of those tools available to us and making some safe tools available to us as well.
And that inertia is good. Now and I've just had some great conversations with side parts of the business that really never engaged before. But it's one of those things where now we're collaborating on how we can go out and do stuff, which is, again, security enabling the business is awesome.
Yeah. Jason, how do you start your day? There's so much going on in security and AI. Like, how are you keeping up with it?
Mountain Dew first. But I've got, so intelligence is one of those things. Situational awareness is a big thing from a security perspective. So just like, the executives out there, checking out Forbes and all of the different things that they get their intel from, I've got to get my intel from various and sundry sources, some legit, kind of places that you would think, some, I've got to check the dark web and the other, places to make sure that there's those things.
Is there a CISO signal chat that y'all are on?
No, that's funny. No, I want to see the stuff that isn't sanctioned. And, so that's part of it as well. And then you kind of extrapolate from that and triangulate what's the reality. I just kind of want to make sure that there's not anything out there that I'm not kind of appraised of. We can't protect everything. I just told somebody today, the analogy was, my goal isn't to go through life not getting sick. My goal is to go through life not dying from getting sick, right? Security's the same way. I don't guarantee we're never going to have a security event. I don't guarantee it, but my quest is to make sure that we don't have a horrendous event because of a security event.
Yeah, something that's devastating. We talked about AI a lot, and agentic AI is like, that's the new, if we were a year ago, everybody was talking about generative AI, and now the hot new kid on the street is agentic AI. The business wants it. They want it now. Security has to put some guardrails behind it. Who blinks first?
I think the comforting part from our perspective, we adopted early AI, so we were kind of ahead of the game related to that. And I don't want to say we saw this coming, because I still felt like, wow, everybody was caught a little off guard with how quickly the agentic thing took off. I mean, the platforms that we use kind of enabled it, and rock and roll, let's go do some stuff. And we're like, whoa, are we containing this stuff? But I think I never blinked. But I had to prove that we could secure it, because that was the first thing, is we don't want to mess up our business from a security perspective.
Right.
I had to prove that. And, those are meetings that you've got to give some specific evidence that and I showed how many agents we actually saw in our environment, which was over 1,000. And everybody went, over 1,000? How does that happen? And we're like, a lot of people are testing it. We could see Fred's AI agent, those kinds of things that they were testing.
I'm curious. I don't want to derail you too much, but 1,000 agents, are those agents being developed from like IT teams? Are you seeing this from other lines of business, or where people are really getting into this technology?
Yes. I mean, you had to have access to the tools. So there were people who were given access to the Copilot Studio in our case, and the Foundry options, but they were out there just testing the stuff, which I think is great. That's not, our organization has a lot of engineers and architects, and I love that. And people out there experimenting. Citizen development, we're all over that bottom-up approach. Now we're kind of focusing on the top-down approach to that, because we got to wrangle all these good ideas and get them and make them productized for us to deliver to our clients or for us to ingest ourselves. But it was a lot of people just trying it out. Now, and then, so once I say we have 1,000 agents and we're covered, we're watching these, we're looking at the telemetry, the next question that, the execs ask is, oh, well, which ones are the most productive? I'm like, I don't have that tool. That tool doesn't show up in what identities are using agents.
Yeah.
But what we could show with DLP is that we could see the tools that are hitting DLP the most, which means people are using PII in the prompt, personally identifiable information, and it could be an email address or something like that. But that was good to know. So I could say, based on that, we can see that this one's getting a lot of use, and it helped us kind of figure it out before we had other tools in place to be able to check the effectiveness of that. But that's still a quest. I haven't seen anybody crack the code on what's the ROI on agents or those kinds of things. It's still but security's the same way. It's hard to get the metrics for security. Everybody's a little different. How do you want to measure that?
I think it's a win if you haven't had a devastating breach, but
that is usually it. Are we in the newspaper? Okay, great.
Right. All right, another trick for you. I know governance is big, but you're like the house that gives away carrots and apple slices when you talk governance.
Dental floss, yeah.
Yeah. How do you first of all build governance quickly enough to keep up with all these things, and then secondly, actually make sure that people are ingesting it and understanding it and abiding by it?
You said an interesting word that I think everybody uses. Quickly is so. Developing governance quickly. I can write a policy thanks to AI pretty quickly, right? But that's not how governance should work, right? It's more than, back in the old days, if you wanted to be a security professional, you find a policy on the internet, you do a find and replace, put your company's name in there, boom, we have a security policy. And you pass every audit that ever comes your way. Governance has got to be part of the culture, and that's a different thing, right? So we've got to have governance in order to meet the compliance requirements that we've got as an organization, because the policy has to exist so that we could be held accountable for it, right?
Yeah.
And then we could be audited against it. But we want it to be part of the organization's culture. So that's one of those things that is a long game that we're still doing training and awareness to make sure that our current governance is in place. But it is a place you have to kind of start. So before all the cool AI and security stuff happens, we've got to do the policies and the guidelines and the procedures. And I think that's, in this cool age of a bunch of smart people doing a lot of cool stuff, we've got to make sure that we can operationalize that stuff. And that's where the governance plays. So great, cool thing. How do we make it so that this works, that this stays on, that it can be restored in the event of a disaster, all of that stuff? If somebody asks us a question, can we provenance of this particular code, those kinds of things, we have to be able to answer those as an organization like ours. And again, that discipline that we have for ourselves, we can pass those tips on to folks that we're helping do the same thing.
Where are they often missing the beat on that?
I think again, a policy that just sits somewhere or is written by IT or InfoSec and nobody really cares or knows where it's at, it's not really helping. But I think that governance is one of those things that it's not it's not what rock stars think about all day long, but it is one of those things that lets you be a rock star.
Yeah. Well, you had a cool analogy in a blog you wrote recently about NASA.
Yeah, and that was a life or death kind of thing, and that was a lot like AI because they were boldly going where no man has gone before, kind of thing, and they had to
very much feels like this moment.
It does, for real.
Yeah.
And I used a quote that talked about governance was put in place because loss of life, there was a lot on the line. More reputationally, there were a lot of things on the line, and that they started with governance, and I was like, that's exactly why we did it this way, and I'm really grateful that we did because our governance model is what allowed us, and security program is what allowed us to go fast. And when you can go fast now, you take share. And that's the way we've got to go.
Is there a specific framework that you can build around agentic AI security?
There's nothing. So when we talk about frameworks, and that's the other thing, I've been a consultant for my career, most of my career, and the reason that I bring a framework forward is because the framework usually has something behind it. An entity that everybody trusts. That's PCI, the payment card industry, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. When those guys come forward and you say to the people that don't really understand the thing that you do, you say, I'm aligning with a framework, it makes them feel more comfortable that, it's covered, right? And as long as he can say or she can say that they're aligned with this framework, we feel like we're covering all the bases. There's really not an instantiated de facto AI framework yet. But what I would say is that security frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity framework and those starts with governance, goes to identity, goes to protect, goes to detect, respond, recover. That's still in AI. So we can apply anything that we're doing. And I also think from a practical perspective in security, people always, not always, but sometimes people say, hey, I need a ransomware solution. I'm like, the best solution for ransomware is a good security program. Same with AI. The reason we were able to ingest AI, like I said, is because we had a good security program in place. So I think there will certainly, and NIST has released some stuff. There's some stuff going on in EMEA right now, Australia and New Zealand. They're out, but there's nothing that kind of is ISO has a standard as well. But there's nothing that's like the thing. And I would say, in absence of the thing, still kind of defer back to something that you're comfortable with, that your whole program aligns to.
Yeah. I can make the connection here too. When we're talking about agentic AI, we're really talking about almost like digital teammates, right? We are creating specific roles that AI is taking on. They're executing tasks. And when we approach it that way, we're often giving the same guide rails to the AI as we would to a human being.
We do it exactly that way.
Yeah. And zero trust and identity, I imagine, would be part of that process as well, right?
Totally. And so those aspects of zero trust, which we, again, we're not the utopia of zero trust, but we're the idea of zero trust. I think that's where most people are in the journey. But the fact that we explicitly give access to data, the fact that we make every agent use an identity, and we can monitor all of that telemetry just like it's a normal user, just like you or me going to access some stuff, an agent doing that, we're going to monitor them the exact same way. And we can see just like risky user behavior, risky agent behavior looks like risky user behavior. And we have that telemetry and those alerts coming in. So it's a beautiful thing when you do it that way. Had we not had those elements of zero trust in place, we'd be quickly trying to implement those elements. Again, having a good foundation is the way that we were able to embrace this quickly. But it's not too late. But it's just some of those things that are kind of hurdles to get over with changing a paradigm of the way that you do things potentially. That's where you want somebody who's kind of figured it out to kind of help you on the way. Yeah.
Is there, when you're looking at like making maybe an agentic AI agent a larger scale agent, you're applying that zero trust. You said you give it an identity, but what does that entail? What does that mean?
Sure. So like depending on the platform you develop on, if we use the Microsoft platform, so it's all kind of built in. So, and that's the way that I wanted it. We use other platforms, but the beautiful thing is when we want those people that created those 1,000 agents, when they went out and created them, it created identities for them. So that's how we were able to track. So if you're using the right tools that have those integrated elements, it's going to go out to Intra, which is Microsoft's identity provider, and it's going to be able to request an identity and get it. So that is one of the ways. There are ways to create agents out of band of that. And again, those are things that concern. What's good about that, if you're following zero trust, those new identities that are created on the side don't have access to the data that's been explicitly given access to stuff that's in your Intra. So Luckily, it kind of works itself out. Now, we don't want a bunch of rogue stuff, and we monitor for that as well, but it's a lot of layers. So the quickest way, again, and I think I was just having this conversation earlier today, is there a way to bypass all of that and do something quicker, better, faster once you figure it out? Sure, but you've got to figure it out first. And I think the safest way to figure it out is empowering people with like a Copilot Studio or the Azure Foundry, Cloud Foundry, being able to do those things. And that's helped us a lot because otherwise there would have been some stepping stones we would have had to go through before we were able to empower our users.
Yeah, it always seems to come back to foundation. If you're talking about infrastructure, security, anything, it always comes back to having a good foundation.
It really does. And data on that back end as well. I mean, that's a lot of people run into that because if we didn't give explicit access to identities on our data and just said everybody has access to our data, boom, then we've eliminated some of the control that we had for rogue agents or things like that.
Yeah. Zero trust seems like such an obvious direction to go and something to pay attention to. Like where are people getting tripped up? Where do they think that they've got it? And then like, where are you finding a lot of the holes, common missteps?
Zero trust is basically, beyond the tenet of assume that you're breached already. The reason they say that as a tenet of zero trust is because if you're breached, you're trying to make sure, what do people have access to? What's the blast radius? Those kinds of things. So always think that way. The way that we deal with it is everybody has an identity. All the data has it so that you have to have been given explicit access to access the data. And then segmentation is the other kind of aspect of that, where certain accounts have no business on this part of the network or this part of the network. So we've tiered our environment out from a segmentation perspective, heavy identity focus and monitoring and visibility around that. And then making sure that all the data, certainly the data that's the crown of our organization, is making sure that explicit access is.
Yeah.
Have we been, we're a 35-year-old company. Is there stuff out there that we got to deal with? Yeah. But one of the ways you could deal with that, which is hats off to legal, is have a data retention policy. Guess what? Everything that's older than 3 years, let's get rid of that. That's residual risk to the organization. If we get rid of that, unless we're required to have it or it's being used every day for business, that's a great way to get rid of a bunch of risks. Now, people are holding on to that data because they think AI is going to do cool stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to make that determination.
Well, and I just think about our human nature is to collect and hold on to things. I mean, it always feels so good when you do like that maybe spring cleaning purge, and we just have to get in the mindset that we don't need all these things for so long. Is that like when you get into a client environment, are those kind of the things that you see that you're like, you don't need all this data. You haven't actually locked down the access points.
Yes.
All the things.
It's all the things. I mean, I'd love to be able to say everybody's a unique, unicorn of, it's pretty much 80% of everybody's the same, us included, which again, while we solve our own problems, we're helping, taking that to clients. When we solve problems for clients, we're bringing that back to ourselves because that's important too.
Yeah.
But I think the whole, everybody kind of does the same thing. Everybody's saving a ton of data. I remember asking before the AI thing was readily available and kicking off, people always would say, we have an intention of using AI with this data. I'm like, but it's like log data from, 10 years ago from your firewall or something. Why do you need this? But hey, we also sell storage as well. So it's one of those things that I
get
a
storage unit for all that data.
No, at home, I've got a gigantic NAS that's full of stuff that I'm just as much of a culprit.
Talk to me about incident response readiness over incident response theater. You mentioned tabletop earlier. I think it was maybe before we actually started recording, but I know it's a practice that we're actually pretty good about here. And it's something that I think we hear a lot about that's maybe not a great practice for a lot of organizations.
Well, yeah. So you don't want to figure out your incident response during an incident is my number one thing. Unfortunately, a lot of people do. But yeah, the tabletop exercises is so, it's fun usually for me. I mean, I'm a nerd, but it's that premise of just basically getting a bunch of folks around a table and going through, okay, this happened. Who responds to it? Who would see this if it happened? And just working through those things. We just did it specifically with injecting, prompt injection into an AI model that was public facing on our website. What would happen? Who would see? How would we do this? Who would we have to communicate to? What are the legal requirements? What would it affect? What would we shut down? How would we push the AI kill switch? And those are great exercises to go through because, you could have something in a policy that nobody read or follows. Right. But again, it's the real. We have the operations people. I'm there. We've got a whole bunch of people from multiple sides. It wasn't just the IT folks and InfoSec doing it. It was the people who were the operations folks. We had legal there. And I think that's a great exercise. Legal had some great input. Operations had some great input. We figured out some places that not specifically related to that attack, but just as we were going through how things are passed off or escalated, we were like, hey, we probably should tighten that up and do some very specific things. At first, if people can't get to something, it's an outage. It's not a security event. Then when does it become a security event? When do we determine that? When do we have to contact legal? When are they brought in? So those are things that everybody should sort out. You shouldn't figure that out while it's going on.
That would be a terrible trick. I'm glad that you mentioned the prompt injection into generative AI. I feel like that's something we haven't talked about in a while, but more to the point, it's, AI is getting integrated in so many different processes, from content generation to code generation. Tell me, what's the latest on how businesses are treating generative AI across business units, particularly with code? Like, are you giving different advice to clients these days from like a security perspective?
Yeah. I mean, we develop a lot of code in our organization for clients, for ourselves. And, again, as we solve our own problems, we take those to clients. But clients that develop code, I think, are realizing there are certain models that are kind of more, it's kind of like you sell something that's, I can't think of a great example now, but, so the Yugo got a lot of heat from being not a great car. So if you're trying to sell a Cadillac and a Yugo, people are like, oh, that Yugo's not that great. Well, what if it's faster? What's your use case for it? It's the same case from a AI perspective. Something that generates really good code. So there's the whole aspect of the usability of it. How quickly can it generate code for my peoples that we can deliver? But then there's also, from the client's perspective, if you're using Grok or DeepSeek or GPT-5, there's a perception potentially. And I think from a transparency perspective, you should be prepared to say all of the different models that are used to generate your code, which is why it's good to standardize on an enterprise platform that you can do those things with. But I think clients are becoming more discerning related to your process. They'll maybe evaluate you based on what you can tell them on your methodology for doing this kind of stuff. But I do think, there's a risk, back to the prompt injection, back to the jailbreak aspects. If we're relying on code that's generated by these to actually call models themselves, then there's a question of which models are they going to call? How tricky can that get? Has the model been designed to design code that lets their application phone home to a nation state or something along those lines? Those are things
backdoors in code.
You have to think about.
Yeah.
And if we've got a bunch of people that are really good at designing or vibe coding stuff, and then they're not good at checking to see if the backdoors are there, we're in trouble. So I think there's a lot of things about developing code that we used to think, oh, it's developers. They're following a software development lifecycle. That's done. Who's the cheapest? Now there's more to that the customers, the consumers of this have to think about. So everybody's got to become a little more aware. And if you're not, you could run into a problem.
Yeah, I mean, these models are changing daily, it feels like. It's so hard to keep up with. So your advice really to clients is like, no matter who you're working with, whatever vendor, get some transparency behind what models are using, how it's being used, where it's being used, have that documentation.
1,000%. And if you ask that question and they can't answer it, it's something to think about.
Go to the next house.
Yeah.
Close the door. Go to the next house.
No treat here.
All right, let's get to another really juicy, this is another dental floss house. So yeah, sorry. Compliance. We've talked about this in a couple other episodes about, organizations understanding how to meet compliance. They will bring in a security expert to help them check all those boxes. Isn't that good enough?
Well, it is good enough. It depends on what you're trying to do, right? I've certified auditor. And the bad thing about that is, with kind of the mischievous nature that you have as a security person, that means I know exactly how to pass an audit. Everybody who's ever passed an audit, or how about this? Everybody who's ever been breached probably passed their audit. Those things don't equate to security.
It's like living in a gated community. It's just it's deterrent, maybe?
It's an illusion, yes. And that's the thing. And I do think people can get hung up in we're compliant, secure. We're not spending another dollar on security in the organization. And we talked about earlier before we got started that, we're not in the newspaper, so we must be doing good. That's a ticking time bomb, in my opinion. So the compliance isn't something that I relish, but it is, I think my opinion when I came to Insight as the CISO was, audit said, hey, we want to run an audit. And I'm like, great. And they're like, what? And I'm like, it's okay. Tell me what we're doing. We're partners in this. Tell me where the gaps are. We'll fill the gaps. And they were like, what a fresh approach. And I think that's, you become compliant to the controls framework that you use. You get audited. They tell you where your gaps are. You go fix those and you become compliant to that, that level. And there's a maturity level sometimes. It's the way that it's a checkup, right? But it doesn't mean, I've gone to the dentist and had no cavities and I went back the next time and had 3 cavities. What happened? And then they, tell me to brush more and floss more and fix those cavities. And then I'm not done with cavities for the rest of my life. I've got to still maintain that.
I see you're still the dental floss house.
I am, yeah. And I'm giving people cavities with my treats.
Let's do a speed round.
Yeah, okay. Let's do this.
All right. You're going to give us 5 power moves for the C-suite to bolster their security. Okay. Starting with, we talked about agentic AI earlier. So what is the thing that leaders can do starting Monday to improve their agent identities?
So I think they need to verify that their agents are getting identities, because it's possible that they aren't. And then making sure, what I had to do was go through every console that we use to check users and make sure we could differentiate between the agents and the users. And I showed that to all of the execs to make sure that they understood where we were with that. And some of the, some platforms are catching up as well, because one of the consoles said coming soon. So they hadn't really sorted the agent thing out as of yet, but they knew that they were going to. So the tab that said agents said coming soon. That's okay. We were covered on 4 other tools that we used, but it was, it's good to know that the platforms are going to be picking that up. Probably by the time now, it's probably in there. But I feel super good about where we are right now, but we can't rest. I mean, that's I'm not going to be sleeping soundly for a little while still.
You're not allowed. Then we can't ask you what keeps you up at night.
Yeah. So Mountain Dew it is.
All right. The tabletop exercise incident response plan. Yeah. What do you need to do Monday to make sure that you're ready to go?
Schedule one. I mean, I think I call them messy meetings. Have a messy tabletop. What's the worst? The best thing that could happen is you learn where you've got to go. The worst that could happen is you faked it and something real happens and everybody's super surprised by it. That is not good business. So we enable the business. We don't lie to the business so they can go, so they get to sleep well. Mm-hmm. We're all staying up. Let's figure this thing out. And I think that partnership is really important.
Number 3, how do you test your workforce that they're paying attention to policies and following them?
Well, we do quite a sinister phishing test every so often.
It is a big trick. Yeah.
So I got it two times ago. I got hit. So it's funny because all the executives, when they do it, they'll reach out to me going, "Hey, I got hit." I'm like, "It's cool. It's okay." And then I got hit. And I was like, "Oh," I did the training. It was like 1 a.m. I'm laying in bed. I looked at my phone. I clicked the wrong thing. And I was like, "Dang, I'm doing the training right now because I'm going through this." But
Jeremy Nelson admitted that he fell for it once too.
It happens. And I think, some people are like, "That's terrible." I'm like, no, it is awesome because the bad guys aren't going to take it easy on us. Let's make it as hard as possible. And then let's work from there. Now, I hope nobody's checks their email anymore, but hey, I can have AI do it actually for me, which I do quite a bit. Catch me up on the emails I really need to look at.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's an important part.
Okay. My CISO says that our identities are locked in. Is there a way to pressure test this?
There is. Be careful because how you pressure test identities is probably doing something with your own identity or an identity that's out there that you're, impersonating. So it's typically good to do those things with authorization, which red teaming, and we do quite a bit. But I think, the way that you would test them is we would see if we did something that was, and usually one time isn't necessarily, it's a positive, but it's not something that we have to chase down because sometimes people click stuff or they try to see if they have access, then need to request it. That's not an event. Somebody going 25 times and 2 different accounts, which is means somebody's impersonating another account, trying to hit something they don't have access to. That's going to raise some flags.
Yeah.
And then if we go back and you're like, "Hey, I was just testing it," we're like, "Okay, well that's cool. Next time, let us know." But I think that would be the test, is just to see if, and that's literally the first step in most cases. It's got to be, we have to have visibility that it actually happened. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, somebody saying, "Oh, 6 months ago, somebody tried to do this. You didn't notice." Well, great. That's terrible. So it's making sure you have the visibility into those things.
And number 5, how often do the InfoSec, IT teams, even lines of business leaders need to be getting together to update each other on potential security threats, changes?
I think, our board is actually really good about wanting a security brief, and not just like, how's Jason and his team doing, but more about like, what are the external and internal threats that we're thinking about? So I think that's good. So that's at least twice a year.
I'm surprised you didn't say more often, but that's with the board.
That's with the board,
okay.
Yeah. I do, in executive ELTs, executive leadership, we do it quite a bit. And, what's also awesome is that I'm not the only guy carrying this torch. Our chief digital officer, my boss, our CEO, Joyce, they're great at keeping apprised of this stuff. I mean, it's a pretty normal weekend to get texts from Joyce going, hey, what about this? And, and I think that's awesome.
So if your leadership is not engaged and paying at least a little attention to security, you need to get them engaged.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And again, it probably goes back to that whole, is security enabling the business, or are you just the department of no, or some expendable scapegoat that they're going to say, oh, let's get a new CISO because this guy let us get breached.
Yeah.
But having everybody kind of, ooh, we want to do this in business, or hey, are we covered in this? Or hey, though, that's a great thing. I mean, it's people probably in the past didn't want their CEO to ask those questions. Bring it on. We want to have this collaboration.
Yeah. One of the scariest attacks that we're seeing these days, and I think it's been going on for a year and it's only going to get better, are the generative AI attacks, where it's a full-on impersonation of, you think you're talking to your CEO, they're on camera, it sounds like them, it's talking their speech pattern. Is there any way as like a normal human being to say like, oh, red flag, this isn't who I think of? And if there's not, what would be your advice for, okay, this person just made kind of a strange request and I got a little bit of a tingle, but because they're my boss, they're important, I'm just going to action on it. Like, is there, I think with families, we heard a while ago about the horror stories of parents getting the call about their child being kidnapped and you hear them on the phone. So families started to put together like passwords. Do you have to do that as a business now? Do you have to have passwords or some sort of like secondary, almost like authentication in another way?
Exactly right. No, and we do use those. So that's, first of all, if you get the tingle, that's what keeps humans alive, is that instinct. And so follow that instinct. And nobody's going to be mad if it was really your boss. They're going to be like, hey, good job validating this. But yeah, I mean, the uncanny valley is gone with that kind of stuff. And it's the natural voice and impersonating somebody with an AI avatar. Mm-hmm. We're doing that later today, right? So it's definitely going to be there. But, with the executives, with those kinds of things, if somebody, the way that you keep that from happening is, how did this person get into our, environment in the first place? Is this a Teams meeting? Is this a Zoom meeting? Is this something that we had scheduled? Because that person would have to log in technically as that person to get in. So luckily, having good identities and keeping people out of our environment in the first place. But yeah, we have literally the most basic of things is, I know the phrases from the folks that I have to deal with when we're going to make decisions, but also never act very significantly from a simple text message, or especially if it's not from a number in your contacts.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things, but that's never going away. But the standard social engineering tactics also apply. So, it's a person of power, or a person or it's a level of urgency. All of those things are still going to apply. And we consistently do training, reminders.
I was going to ask, we get those phishing emails. Are we going to start getting deep fake tests too? Like, I'm going to get a one-on-one with Joyce and be like, oh, wow.
I am not saying that hasn't been requested.
Oh, it does sound like that's probably the next evolution of cybersecurity training within corporations.
It is. And again, some people would say, well, that's not fair. And I'm like, I get it. But
not fair.
Not fair to try to trick people that way. But the adversaries are doing exactly that.
Yeah. So I would rather you play a punk on me than.
Yeah. It's like, am I being punked?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally. And again, I think that as we think about security in general, you haven't done anything horrible because of a security event. Somebody's taken advantage of you in some electronic or personal way. What we've got to make sure, back to that whole sickness thing is that if it does happen, how far can it go to cause loss or some type of serious event happening at the organization? It's got to be more controls than just somebody texting you saying, I need $600 in Steam gift cards, right? It's got to be something where, for me to do that on my corporate card or those kinds of things, there's got to be other controls in place.
Yeah.
And again, a good program with good governance, good training and awareness, all of those things kind of come into play because we get down to the level of tracking shipments and those kinds of things to where we can say, this doesn't make sense, and we can go back and figure that out. But that takes a program that's mature enough to actually get to those levels, because sometimes if all you're ever doing is just in time kind of stuff, if that investment hasn't been made or your team's not mature enough, you don't have the right platform, those people never sleep. I at least sleep a little.
It feels like we're moving toward a future where AI particularly is going to make the day-to-day tasks that today we're struggling with and getting bogged down with, and like those big decisions are somehow happening miraculously fast. So it sounds like at some point the dream is AI has made our daily lives easier, and the consequential tasks that we might do that involve sending payments or extractions, there's actually going to be a little bit more red tape there, and it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, there's the whole human in the loop aspect is an important thing here. If we just had everything agentic and we just sat back and collected paychecks, we're pretty far from that, in my opinion.
I hope so.
Yeah. Let's just make our AI avatars and go home, right?
Right.
But the human in the loop aspect is still required. And again, I think if governments and regulating bodies have anything to say, they're not going to let everything be totally human out of the loop. So we're still going to have those things in place. And again, as people are looking at how to ingest AI, they'll need to look at where those checks and balances need to be, re-engineer processes, those kinds of things. Okay, if we're doing like next level Jetson stuff, there's still got to be somebody at the end that's going to push okay on the button. So.
What are you excited about over the next 6 months?
My team, we're like chatting all weekend. We're doing a lot of cool stuff. Model context protocol. And what that does is it gives the agents, because here's the deal. From a security perspective, I want a bunch of agents, but I don't want everybody who makes an agent to have to program the right security into it. Otherwise, now I've got to check every agent to make sure that it's been coded correctly. I want all of those agents to kind of forego that and then go through something that can tell them where the stuff is properly, that they don't have to do themselves. And that's where MCP comes in to save us. So it's...
Can I ask you this is an example of this? Because I recently used our internal Copilot that has GPT-5 now.
Yep.
And I'm planning a work trip. And so I said, here's the event I'm going to. Here's the hotels. Find me some flights. What was interesting about the results is that it actually referenced the system that we use to book flights and was like, make sure that it's compliant for this and that. And when you submit, like it referenced our process. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So that's what people are going to expect moving forward. Now, the security aspect of that is it's not a standard yet. So there could be something better that comes along. I doubt it. But the thing is when things get standardized, then we can audit them and check them and those kinds of things. So we're at this interesting thing where we're leaning in and still going into this because everybody is, and we want to be really comfortable with it while we're doing it and leverage it ourselves. But the standard makes it so we can kind of productize those things, and I see a lot of that. That's going to be one of the things, if agentic was going crazy, MCP is one of those things that's going to allow us to settle down, y'all, and here's how we do this kind of stuff. And it makes it easier for agents to be created, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and used capabilities like flights or weather or those things that, why would they want to code that? They don't. They want something else to go figure that out.
And this is a great process. You guys are figuring out piloting in-house, and then when you're going out and meet with clients, because everyone wants agents right now.
Yeah.
You're just replicating what we've discovered.
Absolutely. It's the most beautiful way to work. I mean, I feel fortunate to do what we do from a security perspective, because what if we didn't take security to our clients?
Yeah.
If it would just stay here, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity. What's cool is when we do something cool, we can take it to our clients.
Jason, you're like an astronaut. You're just out there in the new frontier.
Yeah. And it's awesome. And we will boldly go where no one has gone before. But I think we're all, and that's the other cool thing, is we're all going together, which is neat. It's not just this solo mission. It's everybody going together, because it's cool to watch, but it's better to participate. So.
Well, I can't think of any better way to end our conversation today. It was truly a treat to talk to you.
As well. I, always enjoy our conversations. Let's do it again.
Let's do it. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Insight On. If today's conversation sparked an idea or raised a challenge you're facing, head to insight.com. You'll find the resources, case studies, and real-world solutions to help you lead with clarity. If you found this episode to be helpful, be sure to follow Insight On, leave a review, and share it with a colleague. It's how we grow the conversation and help more leaders make better tech decisions. Discover more at insight.com. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of those of the host and the guests and do not necessarily reflect on the official policy or position of Insight or its affiliates. This content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional or legal advice.